Welcome to Wise Wednesday, the podcast that goes beyond the highlight reel to uncover the real stories, the setbacks, the pivots, the long nights, and the moments that make it all worth it. Hosted by Jacob Britton, each episode features honest conversations with creative professionals, entrepreneurs, and out-of-the-box thinkers. Together, they explore not just what these guests do, but how they got there, what they've learned along the way, and the hard-earned wisdom that shapes their journey.
All right. Hello. Welcome back to Wise Wednesday. This is the podcast where we go beyond the highlight reel and talk about the real stuff, the struggles, the pivots, the late nights, of course, the moments that make it all worth it. I am your host, Jake Britton. Each week, we're going to kind of sit down with creative professionals, small business owners, these out-of-box thinkers, and kind of unpack not just what they do, but how they got there and what they've learned along the way, the wisdom they've picked up. And today's guest, I think, brings a lot of that kind of insight of intentionality and the things that we love on this show. Phil Carrel is joining us from Detroit. He is a freelance filmmaker, photographer, based out of Motor City. At the heart of his work is a passion for human connection, storytelling, culture. He's worked with creatives, nonprofits, and brands alike to capture stories with true empathy, care, and authenticity. And we're super stoked to have him. A fun fact about Phil, he and I actually probably picked up our cameras around the same time, way back in the early 2000s. I went to high school with Phil, so we got a little history to catch up on. Thanks for being here, Phil.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Great to be on the show.
Cool, man. Well, yeah, we like to dive right into it, right? And we're not here to give the listeners a bunch of fluff. And we want to talk about you, and we want to talk about the journey of kind of how you got here. So if you want to kick us off, and we'll call it the creative journey. How did this
Yeah.
journey really start for you, as far as kind of to where you are today?
Well, it kind of started when my family got a camcorder to record my siblings' sports activities. And I started messing around with it on my own, kind of doing some linear edits, kind of in camera stories with friends, and got really into skateboarding and filming skateboarding, and just really wanted to edit it. And I didn't have the tools. I didn't have access to a computer that could do that or knew how to like import the footage and everything. So eventually was able to learn all of that in high school in classes at Forest Hills Northern, which was really cool, great opportunity. And that sent me straight to film school, basically. Really fell in love with making videos and sharing them and being a lot more expressive in my video making than I even realized at the time. And yeah, it's been a great medium to kind of share my creative visions and collaborate and get a chance to do a lot of fun stuff around the world.
Yeah, I love that. I do want to, talk a little bit about those around the world travels for you. But I just think it's funny. You talked about like picking up that camcorder, filming a lot of skateboarding, not really having the technology to edit. I remember doing like I would have like a camcorder rolling. I'd have a tape deck going and like trying to time the music in the taping and then like rewind and so we could splice it together like that way. My dad had like a VHS camera that he brought home from work one day, and I basically took it as mine. And so that was just some of the creative workarounds to try to like splice the music and the timing and same thing that you mentioned with skateboarding, right? I feel like that sport it's not as rare as you might realize that some of these guys really doing some awesome creative stuff behind the camera got their start documenting skateboarding or those types of extreme sports, and I think it's because those are the sports that these out of box thinkers are gravitated towards. There's a lot of expression in skateboarding and a lot of expression in those types of sports, and I think that it's just like this happy marriage. But it's funny and no surprise that you kind of got the start the same way that I did, with really just figuring it out in these weird ways to try to create something fun. And then, as I mentioned, Phil and I went to high school together, and I think, are very fortunate at the high school experience that we went to and the tools that they had. What do you think about like the place that we grew up as far as, the tools at our disposal, especially in the high school level, help shape you to where you are today, not only with like teaching you some of the technology and the tools, but even just the way you think and create?
Yeah, there was a class, I believe it was called mass media, and that kind of pulled the curtain behind the smoke and mirrors of filmmaking, more so in a commercial sense. The teacher really wanted to show you that, these filmmakers are kind of lying to you, or like it's not quite what it appears. And that really opened my mind, and I saw the power of that. And I was really interested to use it as a storytelling tool. And yeah, we had a Final Cut Studio 7 in high school, so we were able to work on professional tools, pretty solid computers. And we also did a TV broadcasting class. So we would make videos, broadcast them live to the school for morning announcements. So we got kind of like a twofold experience there with creating things more in kind of the narrative or documentary vein, and then doing like live broadcast, which I think was huge. And I think junior and senior year, I had 3 or 4 video classes that I was doing. So it was incredible in high school to have that much hands-on editing, filming, and doing live broadcasts.
Yeah, and I think I do like I talk to other, creatives out there and their like high school exposure to that type of technology. I know that I definitely I think I took it a little bit for granted, the type of stuff that we had at our disposal. And looking back at it now, like how much that actually helped me kind of, I didn't go to college, and after high school, I didn't really use anything in the film space, but I definitely was like creating still, and more skate videos, more passion projects, eventually started a wedding company, like whatever I could to keep filming. And I felt like I always had this leg up on what I wanted to do, because I knew I wanted to do something in this space. And, different doors closed, new ones open, etc. I always felt like the stuff that I learned in high school has stayed with me, but that I probably took advantage of it a little bit. How do you feel like, looking back at like your story, let's just call it like, from the first time you picked up your camera all the way till, you're making it a career, right? There's always things that you pick up, and people, places, who are some of those things that help shape the way, you create today?
Yeah, I would say early on, just like the teachers in high school that kind of opened me up to this as a career. I didn't fully understand how viable it was. I wanted to be a professional skateboarder for a good couple of years in high school, and eventually saw that filmmaking was viable. Went to a film school in Grand Rapids, and some of the teachers there definitely inspiring, getting connected to doing some internships on feature films, working with people just at a higher level, just working on features in Michigan was something I never thought would happen for me. I thought for sure I'd have to go to LA. Luckily, the film incentive passed. And right as I was kind of getting out of film school, 2008, and was able to work on a few feature films. And that was huge experience for kind of long form creation and higher production value, just bigger crews. Just seeing how the beast of film production works at that level was huge. And also just other creatives like me doing things on a smaller scale, and just showing me that that was also possible to do well, and you can still have quality work even without a big crew.
Yeah, and I think like I do think it's great that Michigan is like, I feel like found a spot on the map as far as like filmmaking and real production, happening here in the state. Any projects, that you were involved in, whether it be your time at Compass or, shortly thereafter, that you want to just kind of shout out that maybe, opened your eyes even more?
The first feature I worked on was Tug, and that was filmed in Holland. And I worked with a great crew in the art department. Um, and the connection with, let's see, James Cunningham, production designer, Harold Kronk, who's more of a director, but he was working as an art director at the time, Matt Tailford. Those three guys were kind of incredible for my early growth in the feature film world. I went on to work on quite a few feature films with those guys, and that was a huge learning curve. Art department, it's like you need tons of different life skills. It's like how to take a door off the hinges really quick, or like how to paint, I'm blanking on the word, but just so many different kind of life skills of this is what the camera sees and it's the world. And the more you kind of know about the world, how it works, and how to fill a frame and how to share a character's backstory all through art department. I think that was huge. And really helped, that first opportunity really just helped me get connected to the West Michigan film community, and was able to continue working on feature films for quite a bit. They kind of dried up in Michigan once the incentive went away. So that was definitely challenging. And I was pivoting more towards editing at that point.
And that's like a perfect segue because like I want to talk about some of that pivoting that happens is like when you're in this creative space, like for me, for example, right? It's like started off doing some production company focusing on weddings. I did that for like 4 or 5 summers, then like kind of understood and did more branding, point of sale stuff in the beer and beverage business. Eventually started my own company where we're now like full service digital marketing, and I'm doing like high end strategy and SEO and paid media and all this stuff that's not even really related to film. And you mentioned, or I mentioned about Phil in the beginning, is that he's now doing a lot of stuff with portraits and different things in the space in Detroit. But like, talk to me about how that creative industry can sometimes just feel like a free fall, and you just have to you have to find your space, right? And you do have to be willing to pivot, and collaboration is big, which always opens doors for pivoting. But tell me a little bit about your experience, because here you are working on feature films like Tug, the one in Holland, and now you're in Detroit, freelancing. So tell me a little bit
Yeah.
about that.
Yeah, I basically started freelancing, I think senior year in high school, just started to pick up some odd jobs, weddings definitely being one of the early things I was doing. And so, I've gotten paid to be behind the camera, to edit, to work in art department. Maybe I've even been paid to, boom op or something. Also direct, also take photos for a brand. So there's there's a lot of different kind of skill sets that I guess that I have, and different roles that I can fill. I think at the end of the day, I am a creative communicator using visuals mainly. I also write, but yeah, using visuals to tell a story, to communicate something, to communicate a mood, a feeling. So that's at the base of it. Editing has definitely been my bread and butter throughout my 15 plus years of freelancing. I did take an agency job as an editor for about a year back in 2015. That was the first time I kind of tried a day job, more regular 9 to 5. Everything else has been freelance. And I think I like maybe the consistency of the day job. Freelance, it's super busy or super slow. I try to like make it be a happy medium, but there's only so much control I have over that. So take it as it comes. But being
Yeah, and
able,
that's where that power of networking can really come in. And yeah, you're totally right. It ebbs and flows, especially in that freelance space. And it does sound though like you've found your spot where your name is known and people are reaching out to you for your expertise and your process. and really like leaning into, how, your abilities and using them in fun projects, so tell me a little bit about like your process, as a creator. So say, I'm a company in Detroit looking for, let's just use a short, story piece about my business as an easy example. And I'm looking to create a film. What is Phil Carroll's approach and process to helping that, kind of become a real thing and developing that film?
Yeah. First, just listening to the client, just seeing what it is they want, if they have a vision for anything, what sort of story they might want to communicate. Just asking some questions, kind of drawing that out, seeing who they're trying to target, who's their audience, and taking all of that in, and developing a story from there that will work for them, and determining whether that is more documentary style or if it's more of a narrative story. Those are, I would say, two different specialties I have as far as telling a story. So yeah, figuring out what is best for them, what is that length, what platform will it be distributed on, to get to their audience, and finding all of that and kind of creating something that works for all of those variables. So it's a very bespoke process, and just kind of depends depends on the client and their needs and also their budget.
I like that you kind of described it as this bespoke process because liked I think it was in your onboarding where you talked a little bit about like this idea that the process of creating is just as important as the finished product. Care to elaborate a little bit about that?
Yeah, I think, when you focus on outcomes, you can kind of maybe get impatient with the process. Maybe things aren't going the right way and you get frustrated. So just really dialing in your process, like how do you want people to feel while they are working with you? Like, do you want them to feel like you're this angry dictator who's yelling at them to do all these things? And like, how is your tone of voice? And, because film production, photo production, like it can be stressful on set. There can be the ticking clock of the day, and you have only so many hours to get the shots, to get what you need. A lot of times it's not going exactly as you envisioned. There's little bumps in the road or little tweaks, of the location or what it actually looks like. So you can do a lot in pre-production to try to like smooth that out, make sure you know where you're at, what angles you're doing, what needs to look nice, what can be the place for all the gear and all of that, and just try to work smart, be efficient, and really care about people in the process. Because at the end of the day, I think, relationships are the most important thing in life. I don't think, what else do we have besides kind of relationships, I'd say. So maintaining just like good relationships, positive, just like, because some people try to force things. They'll use non-actors, like it'll be people from the business. And I've literally sat in the editing room seeing a director make someone cry who isn't an actor. They're not, you gotta create a safe and comfortable set for people to really be vulnerable, to express things, and to get kind of to the emotion of a story, because that's really gonna grab people and maybe move your audience. So the whole process is super important.
And I think it's great that you talked about like letting people, kind of do things. They're not necessarily, you got to have some control of the situation but like allowing people to express themselves in their own way. And that includes the entire crew, not just actors, but behind the scenes and editors and filmers and directors and everyone. And then that using that as kind of your focal point enables this collaborative space for safe expression and just a safe area for them to be themselves and express themselves. And then continuing to follow the process, the end product is going to be a lot more authentic, when you're allowed to do that, even if it doesn't go with the exact timeline you want. Not everything, all the pieces don't all fall together beautifully. And I think it's great that you emphasize on that, because I've seen it firsthand, and I'm probably a little bit guilty of myself when I'm working with small businesses or working with other creatives and trying to create this product. And I have this vision in my head, and it's like, hey, do it this way. But really, it's like, let's figure out this median ground, and let's be open to feedback and open to creative expression. So we are getting all people's opinions, kind of in the process to create an even better piece at the end. And when I let that control go, oftentimes, the finished product might come out slower, but it comes out much, much better. I did also wanted to just say, like, I like one of the things that you mentioned was like, all right, what is, part of your process was one of the last comments was like, what is your plan for this finished product? How are you going to, announce it to the world? What platforms are you going to go with? Are you going to run ads, etc.? One of the things that I often run into, and part of the reason I expanded into this kind of full service offering, is when I was focused just on film, they would come to me and say, here's my budget for a film. I'd like to create this story piece. I'd like to create this ad about my XYZ. And that's awesome. And I like, okay, all right, how much of that budget is to the actual film, to actually creating the piece? How much is that to getting the word out there? And I think a lot of small businesses, especially, they miss that mark. It's like, all right, say you're going to do a $5,000 project, just for an easy example. All right, does that mean you got $5,000 for the project and another $2,000 for ads and another couple thousand for organic social? Or does that mean you got 5,000 for the project and you're going to put it on YouTube and expect something amazing to happen, right? Because or you're going to put it on your website and all of a sudden it's going to be this super impactful piece. And as you and I know, that's just not the reality. So I want to talk a little bit about small businesses and just some practical wisdom. I'd say, like, my focus, at least here at Wise Bear, has been small or medium format businesses, and we have some larger ones too. But I think oftentimes small businesses overlook certain pieces to what we're doing. For the filmmaking perspective that you have, what's something that small business owners overlook in your area of expertise?
Yeah, I would say that I don't necessarily see a lot of video content from small businesses to tell their story. I don't know if video is kind of on their radar to invest in. I think things have changed a little bit just with more content creators or being on social and, throwing some cell phone videos up. Obviously, the tools have come leaps and bounds with the quality on everything. And I think you can really engage your audience and, build your audience too. So actively building your audience on different channels so that when you do have something bigger to kind of release, you have more of an audience to release it to. Yeah, kind of, there's convincing people the value of, telling their story and creating a nice piece can be one of the challenges because, a small business doesn't necessarily have 5 grand, to put into a film. And so I'm not exactly on the marketing side. So yeah, what are the numbers? Is it better to create a bunch of content, just kind of user generated content and really get your messaging out, or invest in a better quality video that might elevate your story and brand a little higher and share that? I think a combination of both is probably, a great strategy. And jumping in there and telling your story, I think, is really important.
Yeah, I definitely think, storytelling, authentic messaging is key to any and all business. And a lot of people miss that mark because a lot of small business owners, they want to put out like polished things, like extremely polished things. And for a story piece, of course, you want it to be high quality and extremely polished and pretty and cinematic and, those types of qualities. But I do think that there's a balance, and you mentioned it, right, of like, what are we doing to show that we're authentic, in the social space or the social media space or just like online? Are we picking up the camera and showing, Bob on the tractor moving, rocks for a landscaping company? Are we interviewing customers to show real testimony? All these things I think often get overlooked because small business owners, operators, they're usually both. They're operating, they're owning it, and they don't have the time, they don't have the energy, they don't have that, like, they don't see the ROI on it. And one of the things that I always, tell people in that situation is like, listen, you can't really afford not to do this because of the way marketing is really going, right? There's opportunities to use the equipment that you have at your disposal and create some good content to at least get stuff out there that makes you feel or appear human, right? Nobody really buys into jargon anymore. The consumer, even if it's somebody just purchasing, looking for lawn service, is more likely to purchase from somebody who they hop on their website. It's clean. It's got real people. Maybe it's got a video about them and how they, pride themselves in integrity, as an example, or something, over somebody that you just hop on their website and there's a couple of generic stock photos and a couple of lawnmower and icons and a call to action that says book now. Right.
Yeah.
And I, talking with the whole marketing experience and just using website as an example, having that website from start to finish, tell your story, is the goal as you're building out like a homepage. People want to pick up their phone, they scroll through it. And a great opportunity to tell your story is always through video. And I think that a lot of small businesses just are scared of doing that, and also don't have that, mental capacity to take it on. And that's where we're trying to, change that, give them opportunity to share their story without having to do it all themselves. So I think there's always different parts of filmmaking, and I think your approach specifically is unique. Empathy, collaborative led, giving the viewer, giving the business owner a place to actually collaborate in the process. How can somebody like a business owner, let's just keep using the landscaper as an example, maybe, or the lawn care guy, how can he apply that approach to, his small team with a limited budget?
Yeah, I mean, whenever they feel really proud of the job they've done, whip out your cell phone, take some photos, take some video, show kind of behind the scenes, show the fun, show the passion for what you're doing. And I think if you show some of those real moments, those real emotions, that can be contagious and get people to be like, oh yeah, I want someone who's passionate about lawn care and, loves when they edge the sidewalk really nicely and cleanly and, clean up afterwards and it looks all fresh. So I think if you're able to share kind of what gets you excited, you're going to find like that excites other people as well. And if not, you'll show that you can do a good job. And, that's kind of baseline of just illustrating what your company does and that they do it at a high level.
Yeah, I think that's awesome. I mean, I think again, there's this desire for businesses to always put out this perfect video or this perfect piece of content. And if they don't have that, then it never sees the light of day. And a mentor of mine actually kind of encouraged me to do this podcast because he's just like, shut up and post, shut up and do it, like just do something instead of just talking about what you're going to do. Right. And I think that same type of advice could be applied to everyone. Now, I'm not saying grab your old Motorola Razor and, flip it out and put some pixelated, crappy content. But if you have a nice phone and it's decent lighting, you're proud of the project, make sure you're documenting it, and it will show that you care, and use that care and that authenticity and those values that you have, as your compass for your business, but also as a compass for when you're creating. And I think that's often overlooked. So Well, Phil, I know we're running out of time. I've been trying to do these in 30 minutes or less, but I've really enjoyed this conversation. So I want to kind of just move into some final thoughts, and these are kind of these weird questions because they're like, is there a quote that helped guide your path, right? But the idea here is, we want to touch on creatives that are still doing it, right? You've been doing this quite a while. I mean, 20 years, right? Plus professionally for 15 plus, right?
Yeah.
You've been doing this and you've pivoted and gone through quite a few different things. So what's one piece of advice that maybe you've heard along the way that's never steered you wrong that you feel like you still follow to this?
Man, I think being persistent, honestly, in this industry, keep showing up for yourself. And when you're not getting hired to make work, make your own work, keep sharing it. And that's really like you have to be so persistent to keep going. Like there's so many doors that will shut in your face or revenue avenues that completely close off. You might be, as a freelancer, you might be working for a producer one year. They might be your bread and butter the next year. They take an agency job in North Dakota. That happened to me one year, and I was like, wow, there goes there goes a lot of revenue. But you find other people to work with and you keep reaching out, and yeah, you keep kind of building your reputation as well. I think referrals are one of the biggest ways that I keep getting work.
Yeah, reputation is everything. These are like big, small industries that I always kind of say, like, it's kind of like the biggest, smallest industry I've ever been a part of because you never know who's hearing your name or seeing your work or seeing one of your clients' work that you helped with. Yeah, reputation is definitely a huge lead source for me in my business, and I think for a lot of freelancers as well out there. Are you learning anything right now? Are you up to anything right now? You want to do a quick plug on something that you're learning or a project you're working on?
I've been a part of a fiction critique group. So different fiction writers, some novelists, lots of short stories, but we critique each other's work. Usually it's like 15 pages or less. So if it's from a novel, usually it's a chapter or it's a short story, and just diving more into writing and finding my voice with writing, but also learning more about writing from others has been really great. Something I picked up here in Detroit in the last just over a year, I would say now. And Chat GPT, a lot of people are using AI to write things. And I just want to be a better writer. I want to keep challenging myself as a writer, even with emails, fiction, screenplays. So I would say I'm learning more about writing right now, and that's been really cool.
I think that's awesome. So I have this weird final like signature closer question. And basically, if you had to boil down everything that you've learned, both professionally, personally, creatively, spiritually, whatever, try to boil it down into this like one truth that you feel like maybe you still follow. What would that be?
The thing that comes out to me is, the river. This is from the Tao teaching. It's the river basically always finds its way to the sea and it takes the lowest path. It's like always the lowest. So it's not always being kind of, you don't always have to be really loud to accomplish things. And I think in today's society, it kind of pushes you to be loud and flashy. But I think just being consistent and finding your way to the sea, like it can mean being low the whole way. But I think that's a really powerful analogy that's kind of stuck with me ever since I read that. And I was like, oh, that's kind of like me.
I like that though. I like that. It made me think of that movie. I think Norman McLean did it. It's a river runs through it. It's got like Leonardo DiCaprio, or no, it's got Brad Pitt in it, and they're like trout fishermen in Montana. But there's a quote in that movie, and it's something that I Gosh, I think I even have it a poster, but it's everything. Eventually, all things merge into one, and a river runs through it. I really like how that quote kind of summarizes life, the interconnection of life and experience, and the natural world, and filmmaking, and passions, and all the things in between that you've experienced. So I think that's great. And I really do, again, want to thank Phil for his time. Next week, we are sitting down with Mr. Jeff Dutton. He's a storyteller, a creative writer, and we're going to chat with him about the power of verbal brand identity. So that's going to be an interesting episode. Make sure you tune in. We're going to try to do these every week on Wednesdays at 3 p.m. And Phil, thank you again, man, for being here.
Yeah, thank you. Appreciate it. Great seeing you again, and love the kind of full circle from, the start in high school to where we are today.
We didn't even chat about our history, man. We'll have to do a episode 2 where we just talk about like how we used to do 24-hour film festivals together and like
Yeah,
just weird stories from the early 2000s. Maybe we should get like Hood and Tabashka on one of these and just do like a group powwow one of these days.
yeah. Brian Klein.
Oh, the whole deal.
Yeah,
I love it.
awesome. Well, great
Well,
seeing you, man.
good to see you,
Appreciate it.
man. Talk to you soon.
Yep. Bye-bye.